Exodus chapter 2, and this is the birth of Moses. And that is going to help us. The book of Isaiah 55 talks about this, says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." And so we cannot be on the same level with God. And that's why he does exceedingly abundantly. You ask for it, you pray about it, you declare it in prayer, and then when God comes, because his ways are higher, he must come and do exceedingly abundantly beyond what you prayed for, what you declared to be. And that is what shows you that we are never in the same level as God. And the word of God says, "Now a man," the book of Exodus chapter 2, "Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the waters." And this is the word of God. Interesting scriptures right there. You know, the word of God saying and telling us about the birth of Moses. Now, interestingly, Moses was born at a time where there was so many male children, or the women of Hebrew were so productive that it scared the Egyptians. And so they got to a place of a gathering. If you read, I think Exodus 1 and thereabouts, you will notice that they got to a place and they realized, if these people keep on producing or being this fruitful like they are in terms of getting children, then there are going to be so many, and at some point they're going to come and overpower us. And so what happened, they said, anyone that is born that is a male child is going to be subjected to death. So this again is repeated when Jesus Christ is born, because even in the time of Christ, as they were looking for the king, they killed all the male children in that bracket. But for these ones, they were killing them because they realized that these ones, the way they are coming, vile wanakuja, you know, they're going to be so mighty, and they're going to overpower us in numbers, and they're going to defeat us, and they're no longer going to be our slaves, but we're going to be their slaves. And so what they did is a decree was given. And so at this point, the deliverer is born, Moses, because he's the one that God uses to deliver the children of Israel from bondage. And so when after his birth, the mother is like, "No, I cannot kill my child. I can't." So what she does is she nurses the child until he gets to 3 months. And at that point, she can no longer hide this child, because I think a young one, I wonder how she hid him though, because, you know, my young one, as when she was young, especially my second child, that one could not be hidden. But anyway, this one must have been supernaturally quieted by God. Anyway, by the time she was getting to 3 months, the son was getting to 3 months, she was like, "I can no longer hide this child." So what she did, she put this child in a basket, and she put him in the river Nile at the banks there, and the sister used to watch over the child. But it's interesting, and I don't know if this mother, you know, at any point thought that there was going to be salvation for the son. She probably knew that this is it for me. Maybe she did it by faith, and she put the child there and hoped that the child would survive. But then she must have thought, when the child goes to the Nile, you know, God, if you don't watch over this child, I'm just giving him off as food to the animals in the waters. But it's interesting that that is the strategy that God gave to this woman, because the ways of God are not like our ways. When she thought that this was it, as much as she had hope and faith that maybe she was going to raise this child until the child becomes of age, she also knew that the Nile is a dangerous river. And so I could just be giving this child off to become food, but I've done my part. She had done her part, and at this point she could not hide the baby anymore. And the strategy that God gave her, he might not have spoken out loud and said, you know, put your child in the Nile. No. But sometimes when you walk with God and you keep on allowing the presence of God to lead you, there are certain points and levels you get into where you don't do things out of your own intuition. You don't do things out of your own leading, but you have become one with God to the point that anything you do is actually spirit-led. And that's why God calls us to be spirit-led. And so this woman might have thought, you know, why would I do this? But then she did it anyway, from obedience and from feeling like this is strongly impressed on me. Let me put this child there. Then something happened. The child survived. Because the children of Israel needed a salvation, needed deliverance to come at some point in their lives. And had this son been killed, I don't know how long it would have taken for them to get another one to come and deliver them. Maybe they would have stayed longer in bondage. But then as things would have it, as God would allow it, at that point in the same season, the daughter of Pharaoh, she came down the Nile and she came to take a bath. And she saw this child. And this sister who was constantly, thank God for elder sisters and elder brothers, who was constantly watching over Moses, said, can I call someone to help you raise this baby? And she went and called the mother. Destiny, the way God orchestrates things. And then eventually the son was given a name. Moses was his name, because the daughter of Pharaoh said, I drew him out of the water. And as you continue to read, you realize that it was really important that Moses survives. It was really important that Moses lives. This morning, I don't know what kind of strategies God could be whispering to you. Remember, the word of God says it is God that gives us the ability to create wealth. It is God that gives us the ability. Reasoning ability comes from God. Insight comes from God. Knowledge, understanding, these things come from God. For God to allow you to even be sharpened to understand the business language, the economy language, those are openings that God opens in your mind and in your understanding. All this comes from God. And so what strategy is God whispering to you this day? What is God saying you to do? And you probably feel like, this is actually, am I sure that this is the right direction? Sometimes things happen and you ask yourself, you know, should I do this, or was I supposed to do it? And then you see a greater outcome from it, and then you realize, oh my goodness, it was actually God leading me. So what strategies is God laying in your heart and in your mind for you to do? What are certain things that are happening around you? And God is saying, take note of them. Don't ignore them. You know, be careful. Note them, because I'm going to do something from them. Or God is just saying, you note them. Have you ever gone to study something and then eventually it made sense eventually in life? But at that point, as you were studying it, you're asking, what is the point? I feel like I'm wasting time. Has God ever opened an opportunity in your life that at that point you didn't see it as a chance or an opportunity, but then eventually it made sense? That is what it was for this woman. As she was putting this child there, nobody would even think that, even let alone Pharaoh's daughter taking notice of this child. Anyone would think at that point that anyone connected to Pharaoh would kill any son that they got. I mean, just think about it. A decree has been given that every male child born to the Hebrew woman must die. So any thinking of, if we're thinking like human beings as we always think, you know, you'd imagine anyone connected to the blood of Pharaoh, if they met a Hebrew son, even if they were 3 months, they would kill that child. So it was not in the prayer items for this woman, the mother of Moses. She was not praying, oh God, let royalty encounter my son because they're going to save their lives. No. She was just saying, God, if you can take this child and raise them up in heaven and then drop them as they're an adult, I will appreciate. But they never thought that a royal person connected to the place where a decree concerning male children had come from would actually be the person that God uses to raise a Hebrew boy. Nobody thought about it. But if you think about it, by the time Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh that Moses met when he went to deliver the children of Israel, he met him, they were like brothers because they grew up together. So the Pharaoh that was on the throne was the same one that grew up with Moses. And so God needed for Moses to grow up in the palace so that he could understand the language and he could know the ins and outs. So nothing in Egypt, when he went back for deliverance, nothing shocked him, nothing surprised him. He knew everything. He knew the operations. He knew their language. He understood what their symbols meant. He knew their magicians. He knew these things because he grew up with them. Again, I'm saying this morning that the ways of God are not ours. So be open to the strategies of God. The strategies of God are wisdom. The way God gives strategy is wisdom. God gives you knowledge and wisdom. And then he gives you a move. You make a move and then something happens. You make another move and then before you know it, things are just shaping up in accordance to the word of God. And so I came this morning to tell you, sometimes you might think about it, it will not make sense. But if God has given the instruction, it is him. And his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. As far as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts. So you cannot put God in a box. You just need to believe and follow him as he leads. In Jesus' mighty name, may God give us wisdom and